Welcome back, everyone. Ryan Kurczak here. I have today a recording for you from the Sedona Astrology, the Vedic Astrology conference that I just returned from last week. It was a talk I gave on Planetary Dignity, but after listening back over the talk, I realized that we ended up going over all kinds of principles that are important to understanding the birth chart at a very fundamental level. So I'd like to encourage you to stay tuned to this hour-long recording. Again, this comes from the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference, the talk I gave on Friday morning. And we're going to be looking at dignity. We're going to be looking at how to use dignity. We're going to be looking at the planets and why planetary myth is so important. We'll also be looking at why it's important to understand in detail how each of the planets work in order to fully understand and unlock the chart. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. I have taken some time to put up some images over the talk. I think they are appropriate to what I was discussing at that time, so you'll have something to look at as we go along. And I would like to say we had a wonderful time in Sedona. Stayed up late into the night, which I usually don't do, but I decided at one point that the trip there was not about sleep. It was about enjoying the company of fellow Vedic astrologers, meeting people like you who tune into this channel that decided to come to the presentation. So those of you that I met that you said you watched these videos, I really appreciate your feedback, and it was good to meet you in person, and I hope that you stay in touch. A lot of good ideas came from the Sedona conference, even though Kapil and I and our friend Kara got kicked out of the first party we were invited to for talking a little too loudly about Rahu and other planets of that nature. But luckily we were invited back later on in the week to other parties where I was able to discuss zodiacs with Andrew Foss and with Michael Bender and Ernst Wilhelm. I talked to them about setting up a research-oriented conference. And we realized that's going to be a lot of work, and it might not necessarily be for beginners, but the idea is to have a conference, or at least something of that nature set up, to where people can somehow come to a way to objectively assess their techniques or how they interpret Brihat Parashara Horashastra. So as you know, starting the 1st of 2016, I'm going to start reviewing Brihat Parashara Horashastra on this channel. So if you're not subscribed, please do so. And why am I doing that? Because Parashara is so key to Vedic astrology. And yet the techniques in Parashara are often not utilized. For example, in this talk that you're about to hear, I speak of the specific aspects between planets, the Virupas between planets, which are beyond the simple aspects that most astrologers use, such as Mars aspecting the 4th and the 8th away from where it's placed. Those are very general, and those are useful when you don't have a computer program to actually do the work as it needs to be done. But we're not in that age anymore. We have computers, so there's really no excuses for this. So on talking to many of these astrologers, we nerded out over techniques and principles and decided that it might be a good idea to set up time to start finding a way to test principles, finding a way to do research that isn't just everyone on their own saying, oh yes, I did research. Well, everyone's done research. And that research essentially comes down to, I tested this on 10 charts, but what I really mean to say is 5 charts. But really, I tested on my chart and I saw that it was right. So we talked about this, Andrew and Michael, and even Ernst, and a few other individuals that I spoke to. Wonderful astrologers, very technically oriented, very intelligent astrologers. We thought it might be good to figure out a way to actually test this, and something that might be accepted in a peer-reviewed journal in regards to how the other sciences work. So we'll see how it goes. Maybe we can get Mr. Harness, Dennis, we can encourage him to maybe have the first part of our next conference just for research papers or presenting research ideas. I think that would be wonderful. But anyway, so it was a wonderful time. I didn't get much sleep and got home, visited with family because it was a Thanksgiving holiday, and now it's Monday. I've spent half the day answering your emails, and now here I am getting ready to present the talk that I gave at the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference. So it was a wonderful time. I highly encourage you to attend these, to increase your understanding of astrology by studying with teachers that you resonate from, conferences such as this, professionals, so that we can together further the science of astrology in the way all sciences are furthered, through study, through contemplation, through analysis, through research. And in that way, maybe in 1,000 years from now, we can actually say objectively that astrology is a science. But until then, we'll keep doing our best. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write them in the comment box. And don't hesitate to follow youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology for the class on Brihat Parashara Horoshastra, which I intend to begin January 2016. Meanwhile, we're still continuing presenting the videos on the nakshatras done with Michael Reed, so stay tuned for those. I believe the last one we published was from Pushya. If you're tuning in and it's beyond 2016, please review the videos on this channel about the nakshatras, the free 52 video series class that we have to help encourage your studies. So be well. I hope you have a wonderful holiday, and I do intend to getting some more videos out before the new year, specifically on the houses and the house lords. Thank you.
So we're going to be going over planetary dignity. And planetary dignity, I have found, is the key to making a lot of techniques in astrology work in the way that you don't have question about whether something's going to be good or bad. Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, for example, in this book, there's a whole chapter on Parashara Bhava yogas. And what are those? Those are like, you have the second lord in the 10th house, or you've got the 10th lord in the 3rd house. And when you get books that have these bhava yogas in there, usually what they do is they say, all right, if it's positive, it means this. If it's negative, it means this. And so when you're first learning astrology, and you get these books and you go through the cookbook recipe of figuring out where they're all placed in your chart, you look at that and you scratch your head and you say, all right, well, how do I know what it is? And one of the first things that I discovered that helps you figure that out is planetary dignity. And so what is planetary dignity? Planetary dignity is allowing us to see, is the planet able to act in its clearest, most conscious form? All right, so what do I mean by that? Well, Venus is a planet of compassion, caring, bringing comfort to others, diplomacy, politics. So Venus is that person who likes to make everyone feel like they're getting their fair share. All right. Venus is that planet that allows a person that when you're around them, you feel supported and nourished, because Venus nourishes people. That's why a lot of times when people have Venus in the 10th house, maybe they'll be a nurse or a massage therapist, because that's the house of career. And so Venus is in bad dignity. And I need to clarify first off, when I say good, bad, and so on, all I mean is conscious or unconscious. Because you can have a planet in good and bad dignity, and that just means that if it's in bad dignity, you have to work on it more. So I'm not going to tell you that your planet's in bad dignity, so therefore you are not going to have anything good with that planet. You might just have to work more to get good with that planet. All right, so keep that in mind. But let's say we have Venus in bad dignity. So Venus is in bad dignity. That tells me that this person is going to have a hard time feeling comforted in the world, or to have a hard time, they're going to feel more stress trying to comfort someone else. You know, like it's harder for them. Whereas I have a friend, she's not here. We found Kapil last night and he kept us out a little late, so she's probably sleeping. But she has a Venus that's to die for. And anytime I'm around her, she just wants to take care of you. Like whoever it is. So it's not just me. It's like if you met her too, you would feel that same way, because Venus does that. Whereas my Venus isn't so good, which is why when you watch my videos, I'm just more like straight ahead Saturnine, because Saturn's my strongest planet. And so for her, it's natural for her to be Venus, to kind of share that Venusian energy. And so people who have a bad dignity Venus, they're going to have difficulty doing that, right? Or if you consider someone with Mars, well, a lot of people think that if you've got a strong Mars, a good Mars, that you're a macho, tough guy who can, beat up anybody, like that kind of aggressive energy of Mars. That's a Mars that's actually not a good Mars. Because Mars, when he's in his clearest, most conscious state, yes, he will fight and he will probably beat you. But he's not going to do it because he wants to prove something. He's going to do it because he needs to defend someone. Do you see what I mean? So when you're looking at dignities, you really got to think about it not in the typical black and white way that most people start thinking about it. You need to think about it in regards to how does the planet work if it was working really well. If it was working really well, if it was conscious, then that's probably good dignity. If it's not, then that's probably a bad dignity. And these dignities, these are the things that when you look at your astrology software, or however you do it, where you see like, let's see here. So you really can't see that, and I can't make that bigger. But so for example, this chart, it's got a neutral dignity sun, neutral dignity moon, debilitated Mars, great friend Mercury, great friend Jupiter, friend Venus, and great friend Saturn. I want to tell you how we get this if you don't know. But I really want to start with this idea of what it's used for and how it works. And so in order to use dignity well, yes, you can figure out what these things mean, and then you can just get out your book and flip to the page and say, good, bad, I'm probably going to be pretty accurate in that regard. Picking the positive if it's good dignity, picking the negative if it's bad dignity. But now, what this requires, though, is that you actually know what the planets, how they work, right? So what do I mean by that? We just discussed Venus and Mars, like Saturn. Everyone gives Saturn a bad rap. Personally, I love Saturn, okay? As you can tell, he's on my arm. There's a reason, he's on my body, right? So I had to chuckle when I got that tattoo, and Saturn's on my ascendant, which is your body, right? And then what's also on my ascendant is Rahu. And I discovered that Kali, this is the yantra for Kali, is related to Rahu. So the two tattoos I get are the ones that are on my ascendant. So I found that interesting. But you have to know what the planets represent. So with Saturn is your capacity to endure hardship, right? Saturn is your capacity to face reality. Why do people not like Saturn? All right, we'll start with the questions. So with what I just said, your capacity to endure hardship, the capacity to face reality. So why might people not like Saturn?
Because it put you on the discipline, it make you to work hard, and it make you to really stay on right track.
Exactly. Do you have my book?
No.
Well, you can have it now. Okay. So that's right. And that's what Saturn does. And most people don't want to do that, right? Most people who contact me for sessions, why do they have a problem? Because of Saturn. And what we have to remember is that we need to get away from this idea that astrology is going to change your life. Astrology is not going to change your life. Astrology is going to give you information so that you can change your life, right? So when I see someone with Saturn, what do I say? I say, well, we need to face the reality of a situation. Because in this world, believe it or not, things die. People leave you. You lose your job. You get in a fight with someone. Someone says, they write you emails and say, you do astrology in such a way that you're ruining the tradition, and stuff like that. You have to deal with these things, right? Because that's the nature of the world. What was one of Buddha's first truths? And I'm not going to give you a book for this one, but there's suffering in the world. That's the truth. There is suffering in the world. Why is there suffering in the world? Because of Saturn. But what does Saturn do? People make a big deal about Saturn because when he comes into your life, usually you suffer. But he's not doing it to come into your life to say, this is bad, you've done some bad things here. What he does is he says, you have some weaknesses, and I'm going to show you what they are. And how many people really want to know what their weaknesses are? They don't. Well, some people do, and you probably have a good Saturn. So, you need to know what your weaknesses are. So he's the guy that comes in, and he comes in, and he doesn't kick you around just because he wants to be mean. He kicks you around because he says, look, I have experience in this. I'm the old one. Saturn's the elder. He's been around a while. He says, you want to do something? I need to point out every little thing that you're going to do wrong so that you can do it right. You see what I mean? And that's why there's the book, The Greatness of Saturn. All right, so if you've got that book, great. If you don't, I would get it. I read this book every Saturday. I also fast on Saturdays as a way to try to understand Saturn more, right? So of all the planets, you want to work with Saturn best because he is going to help you with your reality. And he's also the planet of responsibility. So anyway, back to dignity. I could go on and on about Saturn, but back to dignity. So if someone's got Saturn in kind of rough shape, they're not going to want to endure the hardship. They're not going to want to hear the person say, look, you want to be great, you have to do this. They're the people that call me up and say, when am I going to win the lottery? Or when is my relationship magically going to get better? Do you know what I mean? Like they're not, or, my wife's going through a hard time and, I think I should just leave. And I look and sure enough, Saturn's in a rough spot. The people you want to have as friends are people with good Saturns because they're going to be the ones that are going to be there with you through thick and thin. Jupiter's great too because they're a lot of fun. But when it comes to long term, who's going to be the one that when you're in a rough spot, they're going to show up and they're not going to care, right? They're going to be there for you. I've got a few friends that are like that. And it just always blows my mind. I think to myself, they put up with an awful lot. And they still love you. And the Saturn does that too, right? But it's just the way it's expressed is in a way that most people don't quite like. So anyway, so that's like how you need to understand Saturn. And each of these planets has a particular kind of energy and direction that when it's working well, when it's working consciously, you'll know through the dignity. But you have to know what are those qualities. You have to know what are the qualities of the planets. And this is the thing a lot of people overlook because what do they want to do? They want to make predictions. They want to know how to make their life work perfectly. And so when they first start studying astrology, they say, oh, yeah, I get it. I know what Saturn is. I know what Venus is. I know what Mars is. And they never want to learn those basics of the planets. So first of all, on your own, if you haven't already, you need to learn about the planets by their very nature. All right? Some of you might know, and if you don't, it doesn't matter because I'm going to tell you. I have a YouTube channel, and I have under the playlists a free 52 video series that goes through all of the basics, and there's a series on there that's specific on each planet. So I talk about every planet and what they represent. So this is free. So go get it, go study it, and you'll get a sense of how the planets need to work essentially, right? You know that, and you're going to be able to do this really well. Now, let's get back here. All right. Any questions about that before I move on to something else?
I came in a little late.
Okay.
What's your site called?
Well, the YouTube is youtube.com/Ryan's Vedic Astrology.
That's all I need.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we've got that. And this is something that you have to learn. You have to study repeatedly. I have a book in mind, how to understand yourself without having to look at a chart. Because if you know how the planets work and you know you've got relationship problems and you know what's going to make a good Venus, meaning that someone has a bad Venus and they don't know why their relationship's working because they want to be selfish and take everything for themselves. They don't want to have fairness in their relationship. They don't want to be comforting to the other person. They don't want to think about the other person's needs. They don't want to bring their wife flowers on Friday. These sorts of things. If they don't know that Venus likes these things, that's why the relationship isn't working. And so you don't need to look at someone's chart to know that. You can ask them, or you can know yourself. And so then if you know how the planet works, what you have to do is simply embody the more conscious aspect of that planet. So that's what I mean by benefiting from Vedic astrology without knowing how to read a chart. You just have to know what the energies are like. Because these are the energies of life, right? These are the energies of life. And there gets to be a point when you're studying astrology that you don't need this anymore. Because if you just talk to someone, you start getting a sense of, oh yeah, okay, this planet's probably in bad dignity, or this planet's getting starved. And then you can simply just give them advice based on what you need to work on developing that planet. So you just need to develop all of your planets and you won't worry about this anymore, right? I'm a bad salesman for astrology, aren't I? All right, so let's figure out what is dignity. Okay, so first of all, what we need to understand is that just like in life, where people have relationships with each other, planets have relationships with each other. All right? In this chart here, you can find this on the internet. This just happens to come from my first book, The Art and Science of Vedic Astrology, Volume 1. But this is a chart that tells you what planets are friends with what. All right? And following up on that idea of learning what the planets mean and what they represent, another thing that can be really helpful is learning the mythology of the planets. All right? I did a course probably about 2 years ago. It was my favorite course I did, called The Myth and Magic of Vedic Astrology, where all we did was we went into the mythology of all of the planets. And if you learn the mythology of the planets, you learn how to understand them in their more conscious form and their unconscious form. You also learn why planets don't like other planets, because the mythology is talking about them as kind of people or personifications interacting with other energies. So the mythology will lead you really deep into astrology. So technique is wonderful, it's beautiful, but you're not going to get anywhere with technique unless you know the mythology, unless you know how the planets work. I mean, you might get somewhere, but you won't have that kind of depth that's possible with Vedic astrology. All right, so we have dignity, which is based on friendships. And what does that mean? All right, so with this chart, the way you want to read it is that we have the planet in question here. We have the friends to that planet. So, all right, question number 1. Is Mercury a friend to the sun? Is he neutral, or is he an enemy to the sun, based on this chart? Right. Okay, you all answered. It's neutral, right. Yeah, so Mercury is neutral to the sun. Yeah, it's weird. I know this. I understand why you get confused here. So I'm trying to be clear on this because I got messed up on it too. So Mercury is neutral to the sun. All right, and then we need to look and see is the sun friendly towards Mercury? Is Venus friendly towards Mercury? Yes. Okay. Now, the question we need to see here. Does the moon have any enemies? No. All right. And then we can look and see, just look at all of these. Is Jupiter an enemy to anyone? No. No. Okay. So first of all, the moon doesn't have any enemies. Jupiter's a friend to everyone. And if you learn the mythology, learn that. That's why Jupiter's forgiving. That's why Jupiter supports whoever he's with, right? And this is really a key thing to consider, because a lot of people talk about Jupiter, and one of the things that they say, I heard one person tell me one time, I'm glad, this is great, I'm glad I don't have a good dignity Jupiter. That's what they said. They said, I'm glad I don't have a good dignity Jupiter, because if I did, I would be too orthodox, I'd be stuck on tradition, I wouldn't be able to see the bigger picture. And that's not correct, right? Jupiter does rule over religion, but not in the sense of, this is a dogma, and if you're not doing it right, you're wrong. Jupiter rules over understanding, right, which is religion is based on, but Jupiter is more the spirituality. The spiritual person, the religious person, is friends with everybody, right? He supports everybody. He doesn't care if you're a prostitute. He doesn't care if you do the wrong kind of astrology. He supports everybody. That's Jupiter. And all this comes to play. We see how this works out with planetary dignity. In the same way with the moon, this is what's fascinating as well, is that the moon has no enemies. But does that make sense to you? Okay, so someone tell me why that doesn't make sense to you. Raise your hand first. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Well, all the others have enemies, so why shouldn't Moon have an enemy?
Right. And usually people make a big deal out of, like Mars and the moon together, or Saturn and the moon together, right? Okay, so what did you get for effort? So here's why the moon doesn't have enemies. Because the moon is your ego. And what I mean by ego, I mean your individualized sense of self. Who you are, your projection in the world. And what does your ego, does the ego like to die? No. The last thing that's ever going to go for you is going to be your ego, right? So what does the moon do? The moon adapts to whoever he's with, right? And so that's why when you're looking at someone's chart, you need to look at their moon and the influences on the moon to see what are they comfortable with. Meaning, like if you see someone who has moon and Jupiter and Venus together, that's going to be a person who's comfortable with luxury, who's comfortable with being joyous and happy with people, being jovial, these sorts of things. If you see moon and Saturn, moon and Mars together, that's not bad in the way you typically would think, but that will make a person comfortable with aggression, with suffering, with difficulty, because that's what they're used to. The ego adapts to anything. So your moon shows in your consciousness, what are you used to? And that's why when people, when you become an astrologer, if you are already, you'll notice that you'll meet someone who has the moon influenced by Saturn and Mars or K2 or whatever it might be, and something good comes into their life, right? And it makes them uncomfortable. They ask, well, when's this going to fall apart? You know what I mean? Like they can't, it doesn't feel right for them to be with Jupiter. It doesn't feel right for them to be with someone who's caring. Like I mentioned my friend who has a strong Venus. My Venus isn't really that strong. And what's on my moon, but Mars and Saturn. So I had to really get used to the fact that she kind of wants to take care of you. She wants to give you compliments. I was thinking, what does this person want? Because when you get these malefics on the moon, it just shows how has your consciousness been colored, right? And that's what you're used to. And we need that for certain things. You don't want to go into a war with someone who's got moon with Jupiter and Venus. That's not who you want. You want someone with Mars and Saturn because they're going to fight and they're going to win, right? And everyone has a role to play. So the moon has no enemies. However, you'll see that the moon is an enemy to Saturn, the moon is an enemy to Venus, the moon is an enemy to Mercury. Now, why is this important? Because, everyone makes a big deal about Saturn on your moon. That's actually not that big of an issue. What the problem is the moon on Saturn. That's the problem. Because the moon is your ego, and whatever your ego looks at, it identifies with. Do you follow what I mean by this? Whatever your ego looks at, it identifies with. So if you have this moon and Saturn issue going on, what are you identifying with but what Saturn represents, which are your insecurities, your fears, your phobias, your lack, your psychological complexes. And that's what happens when you get moon and Saturn together, not because of Saturn on the moon, but because of moon on Saturn, because that's what you're looking at. And that's why when you see people with depression, or you see people who just, they just can't see beyond anything, they can't see anything good. They're always looking at the bad thing. It's usually going to be because that moon is looking at Saturn, right? So this is fantastic, because then we also see why is it that moon is an enemy to Venus, and all this comes out of mythology. So Venus is love relationships. Venus is capacity to have fairness and whatnot, diplomacy. And when we get the moon and Venus together, they can be benefic, so they will help some things in your life, but when it comes to personality, and I see this all the time, and these are the people that can get good relationships, but they don't work out in the long run because they make the relationship all about them. Do you see what I mean? Because the moon is looking at Venus, and they want to get all their fulfillment through this love and this connection with others. And so when you get this, this is actually, this combination of moon and Venus, again, like I said, it can be good for some things, but when it comes to personality, and if it's influencing the 7th house of relationships or marriage, it's really difficult because they'll come to you and they don't understand. They've got the beautiful husband or the one that loves them and whatnot, but they always say, but they just don't anticipate my needs. They just don't know they just don't give me what I need. They don't give me all I need because what they want is everything. Do you know what I mean? So there's an imbalance there because the ego is just looking at, they want satisfaction through that thing, and they don't want to realize that it needs to be kind of a fair thing. And this is what I'm talking about here, using these enemies. This is way beyond what we can go into today. But if you want to know more, in this book, it's a chapter on logitati avashtas. I also talk about it on my YouTube channel. On my website, I have a full 8-hour course that's downloadable that goes over the combinations of all these planets and why. Why they do what they do when they get together. So it gives you deeper meaning, deeper understanding about who are you talking to and why are they thinking the way they're thinking, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, going back to what you were saying at the beginning about how it's not really bad,
Right.
you just need to work.
Yes.
So could you just give a quick example of how you would
Work
tell
with
a person,
that?
okay, your Venus, maybe you're a little, or your moon, maybe you're thinking about yourself too much. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I know.
Like,
That's the
give
trick.
That person something more, or
Right. No, I understand. And like one of my best friends has that. And he's always asking me about his relationships. And he's a great guy. And I have tried and tried and tried and tried to describe that to him. And he's a conscious fellow. Like, it's not like he's a bad guy. But like that's the funny thing is like you can explain to someone the Saturn moon thing because I get it, depression, I'm looking at my problems. But you try to explain the moon Venus to someone and they're like, no, but Venus and moon are good. That doesn't make any sense. So if you figure that out, you tell me.
okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So are you talking about all aspects with the moon, Venus?
Conjunctions of moon and Venus, or the oppositions of moon and Venus. Those are the main ones to look for. Okay. There are deeper aspects to look at, but for our purposes, those are the ones that are going to be the most obvious ones. But yeah, any kind of. Okay, so if you've got an astrology software program, I'll just show you in case, because I want to speak to everyone where they are, and I know some of you have more experience than others. But like if you've got Kala, which is wonderful astrology software, it does all kinds of crazy stuff.
Venus is very draining to the moon.
What's that? Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It drains the moon, so because of all its relationship situations, the moon is sort of,
Right.
can be flexible, fluctuating.
Mhm.
So with the Venus, it's like,
Yeah, it makes it imbalanced. Rajasic, that's exactly right. There's a lot of, we could get into that too, but we're not going to. Let me get back to this first. So with the aspects, before I get into that, am I being coherent with you all? Like, are you following where I'm going with this? Because this planetary dignity stuff, I could go on for days about this, and I'm trying to get it all in an hour. So I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit. But hopefully, if you're not, slow me down. With the aspects, if you've got an astrology software program, you want to look for, let's see if I can pull it up here. You want to look for something that's got like a table like this. And it'll be under like aspected planets. And this is more if you want to get really precise with the aspects. Because, you learn, and if you haven't already, you will, that like Mars aspects 4 houses away from it. Have you all learned this? Mars aspects 8 houses away from it. Well, that's really kind of cheating. And that's really not the best way to do it. That's a good thumb rule for way back in the day when we didn't have computers to actually calculate it, right? Because Brihat Parashar Horashastra and Parashar astrology, he actually gives specific degrees about how aspects work. It's not just, planets in the 4th from Mars. It's not just planets in the 8th from Mars or Saturn in the 10th. It's planets 90 degrees away from Mars get the aspect, because that's the 4th house, right? So let me show you here. I have a chart to help you see what I mean. And then I'll get back on track with the dignity. So for example, in this chart, this is based on Parashar, Brihat Parashar Horashastra. And so this 180 here, that's directly across from each other, right? That's like if you have the moon at 15 degrees in Cancer, and you've got the sun at 15 degrees of Capricorn. They're directly across from each other, exact to the degree, 180 degrees. And so every planet aspects to a full measure, 60 points out of 60, the Virupas they call them, a full measure directly across from each other. All the planets do that, right? But they also aspect to like 75%, all of them aspect the 4th house away. But to only three quarters, right? All of them aspect half 120 degrees away and a quarter to 60 degrees away. These are the more precise aspects, which is why oftentimes, when people start talking about aspects, you start talking to them, and when you're new at it, you say, oh, this planet's aspecting that, and they'll say, no, it's not, I'm not having that experience at all. And why is that? Because, let me go down to, where is it here? Like Saturn. So Saturn has, it's moving really slow. Saturn aspects 10 houses away from it. All right, well, this is what we'll have to do. So these are the aspects of Saturn. And so just like every other planet, he aspects 180 degrees away. The 60 degree aspect, that's 3 houses away from Saturn, right? But the reason you can't really all the time go by that is because let's imagine that we have Saturn at, I hope I'm doing the math right, Saturn at 29 degrees of Virgo. And then let's imagine that you have Mercury at 1 degree of 1 degree of Scorpio, which that's 3-house difference, right? So like if we look at it in the chart, that's a 3-house difference. So if we had Saturn here and we had Mercury here, but Saturn was at 29 degrees of Virgo, and Mercury was at 2 degrees of Scorpio. Well, that's the 3rd house, but the degrees, that's not it. The degrees, see how sharply it falls off in between the 30 and the 60 degrees? That's going to be almost a 30-degree difference within that 3rd house. So the impact might be even less than a quarter on that planet. Did you follow what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's why you need to learn. If you're really getting deeply into astrology, for now, learn the thumb rules that we use, because I used those for years and they worked great. But there was too often when I didn't. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. So,
Bill.
you do the hat.
Hey, I thought you looked familiar.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if the planet is in transiting, in sending, then practically the aspect is weakening too.
Well, that's true. Yeah. That was just the best example I could give for the degrees. But yeah, that's right. Right.
And that's exactly the 30-degree shift could be in
Exactly.
that position.
But it could be that Saturn, well, I guess that wouldn't work either. Yeah, you're right. I'm following you. Yeah, good. So he's got a good point. And that's just that when planets get to the ends of signs, they get a little weaker anyway, so the aspect might not be felt. Go ahead.
Is this in Kava, which you're showing us a minute ago? Is that these diagrams in that?
This thing here, this I got from Ernst's book, Graha Sutras.
Okay.
I can email it to you. He doesn't mind. So if you email me, I'll send this to you. And it might actually be on my website somewhere. But learning these things will really help you to, when you tell someone something and they don't quite resonate, usually it's because there might be some kind of aspectual issue going on. So anyway, let's get back to dignity. All right. So we use dignity to figure out how well something's going to work. And the dignity is based on, let's say the sun is in Libra. The sun is in Libra or Taurus. All right. Now who rules, now raise your hand, who rules Libra and Taurus? All right. Now this time, I'll ask another question. Raise your hand, don't answer. All right. Who rules Capricorn and Aquarius? You guys, come on. I'm not going to give any of you anything if you keep doing that. All right, one more time. Don't open your mouth. Raise your hand. Who rules Virgo and Gemini? Raise your hand. Don't say it. All right. Mercury. All right. So give her a book. So right. So if we have the sun, in Gemini or Virgo, we know that the sun is in a natural neutral's sign, right? So like Mercury owns that, so it's like the sun goes in, and he's not in a friend sign, but he's not an enemy sign. It's just like when I arrive at the hotel. I'm not staying in the room of a friend, I'm not staying in the room of an enemy. It is what I make of it to a degree. I mean, there's other aspects to it. But let's say I go into, I'm the sun, and I go into Capricorn or Aquarius. Now that's like me walking into my nemesis's house, and that's how I'm going to be functioning, and it's not quite healthy. It can be difficult. The sun is not able to act in its highest, clearest, most conscious fashion because it's stressed, right? And what is the thing that keeps a person from being conscious? Stress, right? When you feel good, when the world is treating you well, or it's not treating you well, but you understand what's going on, you're not stressed about it. Therefore, you're not going to do mean things. You're healthy. You're conscious. So we need to look at this. First of all, you need to look at the relationship of the planet that you're looking at. See whose sign it's in. And the first step, that's going to give you insight into, is this planet naturally going to be able to do what it's meant to do? So when the sun is in the sign of the moon, and don't open your mouth, just raise your hand. What sign does the moon rule? Raise your hand. Go ahead. Cancer. Okay, great. Did you give him a book? So when the sun is in the sign of Cancer, he's in a friend's sign. So he's going to have a greater capacity to be at ease with himself and to fulfill his roles, inspiring others, being a good leader, being firm on his path, being committed. You know, all these malefics and benefics, you need them all, right? So you don't want to make any of them like, oh no, there's a malefic there. You need them all, because you need Saturn to endure. You need Mars to fight when you're called upon to fight. You need Venus to be caring and compassionate to others. You need Mercury to communicate clearly, to be friendly. You need the Moon to be adaptable. You need the Sun to follow your inspiration, right? You need Jupiter to be able to be kind to everybody and not judge them. Jupiter is not judgmental at all. You know, going back to that other example I gave, a good Jupiter is not going to be one that says, you've got the wrong religion, you've got the wrong way, you know, you're eating the wrong foods. Jupiter is going to say, I love you anyway, whatever you're doing. Right? That's the way Jupiter works. Okay. So when these planets are in the signs of friends, they're typically less stressed out. And when they're less stressed out, they're able to manifest typically more easily. And we have to be careful with this, because we need to remember that this is a very basic beginning understanding of determining how the planets act, and that there are other influences on the planet. So this is not just black or white, that your sun is in Cancer, so therefore the sun will always work well. Because it may be that the sun is in Cancer, but maybe it's with Venus, or maybe Saturn is aspecting it, which means, yeah, he's in a friend's house, but he's dealing with something really heavy. So it's good, he's got support, but he's still got the problem of Saturn and Venus impacting it. So, and when it comes to predictions, you know, when you're in a sun period, and you're in a sun moon, or sun Mars, sun Jupiter, typically that's going to be a little bit better for the sun. When you're in a sun Venus, sun Saturn, typically that's a lot more difficult, because you have conflictual energies coming together, and you're not able to achieve the agenda of the planet, right? That's the issue. So this is showing us how easy can a planet achieve its agenda. All right, so this is step one. You need to memorize this first. This is a lot to memorize. Maybe you already have it memorized, but it took me a while to get this. And what did I do? Is I just put it over my computer. I printed this out, I cut it out, right under my yantras and my pictures of Kali. I stuck it right there. So anytime I was looking at a chart, if I had a question about it, I just looked up at it, and there it is. Right? So that's how you need to learn. Repetition, looking it over. But in time, it becomes easy, and if you study the mythology, it just makes sense. This actually makes a lot of sense if you study the mythology and understand the planets. But for now, you might just need to memorize it. All right, so that's step one. Step two is this principle. And again, I have videos on this on YouTube, so if you don't get it all today, which, this is not an easy thing to get, you can catch up there. So the temporal relationships of planets. What is the temporal relationships of planets? All right. It is that planets act better or worse depending on where they are placed from the planet you're thinking about. So what do I mean by that? Let's look here. So first of all, I'll describe it and then I'll show you in the chart. Planets that are in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 10th, 11th, or 12th signs become temporary friends. So let's look at that. What does that mean when you're looking at a chart? That means for this person's Saturn, planets in the 2nd, from Saturn, in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or in the 12th, 11th, 10th. Make sure. I always get this a little screwy when I think about it. 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 10th. Yeah, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 10th, 11th, 12th. These become temporary friends. And those of you, I had someone come up to me when I arrived yesterday, as soon as I walked in. She said, "Oh, I love following your channel." She said, "But you should smile more." Oh, yeah, there you are. Yeah. She said, "You should smile more." She said, "You should be more like Kapil." And I told him that last night and he chuckled. And I smiled a lot with him. But, when you came in and you said that, I had to laugh. Because the reason I'm serious when I do those videos is because this stuff is complicated to remember. And for me, I can't, it's hard for me to kind of I have to kind of get in a very serious place to keep that all straight in my head. because you'll know when you start talking about astrology, you'll mean to say the 8th house, but for some odd reason you say the 5th house, and it gets all messed up. So just so you know, it's not only my Saturn or my ascendant, it's just that for me, I need to concentrate. So anyway, planets in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th from Saturn, planets in the 10th, 11th, 12th from Saturn, these become temporary friends. Okay? And I'll tell you what this means. We'll see how we put it together, but you have to remember that principle, which means planets in the same sign with Saturn, planets in the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th, they become temporary enemies. All right?
6, 8, and 10 and 12.
Yeah. So it is the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th, and the 1st house. Those become temporary enemies. And what you do, if you use this style chart, for some reason I'm realizing not a lot of people do, but I like it, because Jaime techniques work out really well with it. But if you look at this chart, really, it's always, like here's the planet, it's the three houses away from that planet that are temporary friends, and then all the rest which are temporary enemies. Do you see that?
Oh yeah, that's
Because it's closest to that planet, whether behind or in front of it, that gives its influence, because either behind it or in front of it, but it's closest to that planet. So it feels the energy, that's what I was told.
Yeah,
It's
well,
closest, you know,
when we get something in the sign with the planet,
oh, yeah, but that's different.
that's different because what's happening there, we have to remember that each planet has an agenda, something it wants to accomplish. Oh, go ahead, sir.
Oh, it's okay.
I thought you had a question.
I do.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering, what would override, for instance, if you have two friends in conjunction, but then they're together in the same house, which makes them temporary enemies? So
Hold on to that thought. We're going to get there. That's just the next process here. So when you get two planets, and that's a good question. When you get two planets together, they will help each other on some level, on the Logitati avashtas level. All right. And that's a really wonderful thing to learn, the Logitati avashtas. It's actually pretty simple if you can get these planetary friendships in your head. They work together on that level, but we have to remember that every planet has an agenda. It wants to accomplish something. And if you get two people together, like I want to play guitar, my friend wants to play football, it's not really going to work that well. We might still like each other, but the agenda is not going to be achieved. So oftentimes when we have planets in the same, the reason they become temporary enemies is because their agendas clash, right? They can support each other in other ways. This is the thing we have to remember, is that what we're talking about is the foundation, and you have to layer it out with other techniques that's based on this. But that's sort of the way we think about it. And when we get planets in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, they're too far away from that planet. So it's like your friends that you can take for a little while and you get along really well, but you need to have space. But when you've got friends that are too far away, you never see them, it doesn't really help that friendship. So these are just the ways I've thought about it, and you might need to come up with your own process like what you described very
Yeah,
good.
they become like strangers.
Yeah,
Become like strangers.
exactly. Yeah. So they become temporary friends in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, away from the planet we're talking about. They become friends in the 10th, 11th, 12th, away from the planet. And then all the rest of them, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, in the same house, they're temporary enemies. All right. Now what happens when you get that, when you get this and you put it together? Well, I'll show you. All right. So first of all, we have this table up above our computer or on our desk or on our phone right in front of us. So we need to figure out what's the natural friendship first. Right? What is that first? Then what we need to do is we need to look at the chart and say, okay, well, what are the temporal friendships or the temporal relationships between the planets I'm looking at? And then once we get that, we put them together. All right. So if we have a permanent enemy and a temporary enemy, we get a great enemy. And great enemy is the dignity. Right? That's the thing when you're looking at the chart. It says debilitate, great friend, friend, great friend, and so on. When you have an enemy put together with a friend, an enemy put together with a friend, you get a neutral, right? So let's look at this chart. This will help us to see it in action. All right. So this person. Okay. Are all of you familiar with this style chart? Is there anyone that's absolutely not familiar with this style chart? You're all good with it? Okay, great. So the sun, raise your hand, don't speak. The sun is in whose sign here? Raise your hand. Go ahead. Venus. Would you give her a book, please? Okay. So Venus, the sun is in Venus's sign. So what we do, we go and we look, planetary relationships. Is the sun in the sign of a planet that is friendly towards it? No. Okay, so remember you want to find the planet in this column, and then this shows how that planet feels about that. So Venus is here in the enemy sign. So that tells us that when Venus is in Taurus, that he is in a natural enemy's sign. So he's going to have some difficulty there. Now what we need to do is remember our principles. And so we have the sun here in Taurus. Now, what house is Venus in from the sun? Wait, don't tell me. Raise your hand. Go ahead in the back with the scarf. The 12th house from the sun. Yes, go ahead. Sure you don't mind giving out those books? I don't want to... Okay, great. I don't want to distract you. Okay, so Venus is in the 12th from the sun. So remembering our principles, if you wrote them down, if you don't, I'll remind you, I'll tell you. And raise your hand. Is Venus acting like a temporary enemy or a temporary friend towards the sun? Karen?
Friend.
Okay. You've already got a book though, don't you?
No.
Oh, you don't? Oh, great. I thought you did. You took my class that said this book is required and you didn't have that book?
No.
Wow. All right. Now I see. I knew it. That's the problem with online classes is that you don't see what people really have. But it's okay. You're a great student anyway. So we see that. So what does that mean? So we have the sun in a natural enemy sign, and it's in a natural friend sign. So raise your hand and you put those together. What are you probably going to get? In the back? With a hat? What is that? Neutral. Okay, and let's see if that's accurate. Which it is, but we'll just double check. So we see that the sun has a dignity of N, which is neutral. All right? So what does that tell us? What that tells me is two things. And this is the important part. This is what I've been building up to. Takes a while sometimes. What this tells me is that when I would get out the Art and Science of Vedic Astrology Volume 2, or any book that has these kinds of combinations, Parashara has them. They're a little bit weird in Parashara because they say things like the ruler of, well, let's look this up. So we've got the sun which rules the 9th house going into the 6th house. So we find the 6th house chapter. That's the 7th. 5th and the 6th. Okay, there we go. So we find the 9th and the 6th. And so what Parashara says in the old text is, the Lord of Fortune standing in the rogue bhava, the person has only... What's that?
What page is that?
This is on page 240. The Lord of Fortune standing in the rogue bhava, the person only has little fortune, devoid of happiness from maternal uncle, and always suffering through enemies. All right, so that's what Parashara says. So we have to kind of interpret that. And this also brings up a very, very, very good point. If you want to become a good astrologer, I don't mean the astrologer that picks up this book and just picks things out. You actually do pretty good astrology that way, so that's not a bad thing. But if you want to become an astrologer that really understands astrology and it becomes something for you that helps you understand life, astrology is the best. I don't want to say astrology is the best religion because that's a problem, because when we start thinking about astrology like religion, we get dogmatic, and then we start saying things like Chinese astrologers are wrong, Western astrologers are wrong, and that's not true. The guy who wrote this book, Richard Fish, he passed before we got this published, but he was the most profound astrologer I have ever met. He lived in England, and I didn't get to see him that much. We corresponded through email, and when he'd come to the Kriya Yoga retreats, he was also a Kriya Yoga teacher. We'd meditate together, and we'd talk for hours on astrology. He was a Vedic astrologer since he was in his 20s. He was also a Western astrologer. He was both. And what he told me was, when I was learning Vedic, he didn't talk about Western astrology with me at all when I was learning Vedic. Because what he would say is, you need to learn the system that works for you. right? And if you study that system and understand it deeply, you will be a great astrologer. But he said that for him, he could see how both systems had their merits. And so when he would look at a chart, he was really he was hard on himself because he didn't just use one system. He got both systems out, put them out on a table with all the charts, all the Vargas, all the transits from both, and he would see where do they overlap. And I swear to you, when I would get sessions with him, when I would talk with him, he had no idea what was going on in my life because we didn't see each other that much. The only thing we really talked about was, Kriya Yoga and the Yoga Sutras and Vasistas Yoga and astrology. But when I had some difficulties and I would write to him, I would just send him a note and I would say, I'm having some problems. What do you see is going on that might be able to help me a little bit? And he wouldn't say things like, well, I can see like a clashing of masculine and feminine energies and some like difficult things are going to come out because that's what a lot of astrologers do. They're real general, He would nail it. He would be like, oh, well, you were going down a mountain and you've never wrecked before, but for some odd reason you hit a root. I mean, it was just ridiculous the level of detail he had. And I asked him one day, I said, how are you so friggin' accurate? And he said, well, I've done it a long time. This is all I think about, because he was an herbalist. He pretty much stayed up all night learning astrology and doing charts and thinking about it. But he would look at both of them. And where he saw the overlap, that's what he would talk about. And when you see that, that's confluence, right? And you can do that in any system. So anyway, the point I'm trying to get at is we don't want to treat it like a religion in the sense that, I'm Catholic, you're Muslim, we can't be friends. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
When you say overlap, I missed something in the beginning. You said overlap, that you look at the tropical chart and the...
That's what he would do.
He would do, because I do that a lot.
Yeah. And he just gets insights. And believe it or not, we're at a Vedic Astrology conference, I get that. And there is a tendency to be like, we now have the right way because we have the right zodiac and all this sort of stuff. And I totally get that. I used to be that way. And Dennis said I'd go a little over, just, okay. I used to be that way. I'm an easy fanatic. When I get onto something, I will make sure everyone thinks it's right. Okay, that's just my nature. But I had to learn through hard things that it can't be that way because then it becomes dogmatic, it becomes a religion, and we stop learning. Astrology is supposed to be a science. It's supposed to evolve. Do you know any sciences that stopped evolving 500 years ago? Think about how many of you would not be here because your doctor didn't wash his hands because he didn't understand germ theory. That little thing is just an evolution in science. So we need to treat it like a science, but the reason we can treat it like religion, like true spirituality, like Jupiter once, which is broader understanding, is just to help us understand what is the reality of the world and how can we live in it peacefully and contentedly. That's what I mean by religion, right? So anyway, point being, with these books, you don't want to get into the Parashara Bhava Yogas and just treat them like, they're the gospel. You need to think about them and you need to make them appropriate to this day and age, right? And if you do that, if you think about it, if you get Sarvarta Chintamani and you read the Lord of the third house and the Drekana of Mars, and you think, I should memorize that, and you scratch your head. You don't know why you should memorize it, but you do. You're going to have a lot of head stuff, but you're not going to know good astrology, because if you understand why that is the case, then it will be in you. And you'll be able to apply it to almost anything that's appropriate to it, right? And then you don't need books because you understand the mechanics of it in the same way that a physicist understands the mechanics of nature, right? So when you're studying astrology, yes, get these books, learn the cookie cutter approach, but get some of the old books and don't scratch your head and say, well, I can't do this. Think about it. Say, this makes absolutely no sense to me right now, but I'm going to read that one sutra and I'm going to scratch my head over it for 6 months, and then you'll be in the shower, or you'll be, talking to your wife or whatever, and all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, there it is, because it clicks, it just pops into your head, you know what I mean? So this is how you want to learn astrology. But back to this, the 9th and the 6th. So we know it's a neutral dignity. All right, so what that's going to mean, it's a little more difficult with neutral dignity, because now you're going to have a combination of the positive and the negative influences. It's neutral, right? And when you're reading these things, from books like this, or Bill Lovesey's book, Beneath the Vedic Sky, which is a wonderful book, you need to think about, what planet am I talking about? All right, so let me describe what I mean by that. So the positive influences could be, provides good defense, knowledgeable in legal, medical, and service matters, strong morals and sense of ethics, committed to serving one's guru or religious ideals, Father is involved in law or medicine. Public servant, defends one's own culture. Bound to honor. Relationship with father, teachers, and guru gets better over time. Works hard to become educated and cultured. So we have all these possible influences, right? And again, yeah, you know the dignity, but you're still going to go, well, which one of those do I look at? All right, so what we have to think about, we have to know, again, go back to the idea of what does the sun represent? Okay, so let's think about that. If we read this, would we consider, does the sun have anything to do with father? Okay, yeah, you've already got a book. All right, well, let me ask. Oh, yeah. hold on. Let me ask another question, then we'll do it. So what that means is knowing that the sun, by its very nature, has a relationship to father. The thing we would focus on in these descriptions are the ones that deal with father stuff. Do you know? You see what I'm saying? And in this chart, the sun rules the 9th house, which is oftentimes related, just in general, to father. Right? That's where we get the Bhava Yoga anyway. But so there's that. The other one would be where is it here? So committed to serving one's guru or religious ideals. So committed to serving one's guru or religious ideals. So just in general, does the sun have, when you think of the sun, do you think of like a person's guru or teacher? Like just generally, do you think of that? You don't, right? I mean, you might a little bit if they're inspiring to you. But Jupiter is really the one you would think about if we're thinking like the 9th, Jupiter being the 9th in this position. Okay, so let's read another one. All right, so the negative influences. Father causes deaths. Father suffers accidents or acute illnesses. Enemy blocks one's fortune. Father or teachers are aggressive or prone to conflict. Fights with teachers. Comes from a violent or controlling culture. Grace feels blocked. Inspiration is frustrated. Education is delayed. And it goes on. But let's pick out 2 of these here to see which one you might pick if you have the choice. All right. So now, raise your hand, don't shout it out. If we were looking at inspirations are frustrated or education is delayed, which one of those would you pick? And back there, what's your name again? I know you told me yesterday.
Neat.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So which one would you pick of those 2?
Though I do not understand glyph, but I think 9th Lord in 6th house, it's more regarding, because there is, I think, retrograde Mercury as well. So I think it's regarding, he has communication problems with his gurus as well as people, co-workers, and the father.
Well, you're taking, yeah, that's good. You took it a little further than I wanted. So of these 2, though, we'll give you a book anyway, but these 2, though, of these 2, if we're going to pick inspirations are frustrated or education is delayed.
Education is delayed.
Okay. That would be true because it's the 9th. It's the 9th going into the 6th. But when we pick between education or inspiration, when it comes to the sun, which is more a sun thing? Is it education or is it inspiration? Inspiration. It's inspiration. And that's fine. You took it a little further very well. But we want to keep it a little simple at first. Right? And so the reason we do that is because the sun is the capacity to follow your inspiration. So talking to this person, I might say, and there's other reasons education is delayed, Rahu in the 9th and so on, but Jupiter is there, so that does pretty well. But when we have the sun in the 6th, any planets in the 6th, whatever that represents is going to get delayed naturally, right? Like whatever it represents, like making friends, communication like what you were talking about, this becomes somewhat difficult because it's in the 6th, right? Now, the question then arises, well, is that, let's take Mercury for example. The question then arises, Mercury is in the 6th house, which a lot of people say, if it's in the 6th house, the 8th house, that's bad. That's not true. It can be bad, but let's go back and think about something. All the books are gone? Yes. Okay, so hopefully you'll still answer the questions, but I don't have anything to give you anymore. Well, I've got one more. I'll give you this other one. So whoever answers this next one gets the final book. All right. So Mercury is in Taurus. Now, I'm not going to pull up the chart, but who rules Taurus? Venus. All right. Are Venus and Mercury friends?
Yes.
Yes. And I didn't do it right, did I? Okay, so we'll do the next part. So we got that. So when it comes to natural friendships, we know that Mercury is a natural friend sign, using that chart that we had. All right. Now, now we need to figure out where is Venus from that Mercury. So we know that Venus is in the 12th house from Mercury. Now, I'm not going to pull up the thing, and don't shout it out this time. Just raise your hand so I can get rid of this last book. Is Venus in a temporary friend sign or a temporary enemy sign? In the back there?
Temporary friend.
Temporary friend. Okay. What did I do with it? So it's in a temporary friend sign. So what do we have? But Mercury is in a friend sign naturally. Temporarily, it's also in a friend sign. So when we look at the dignity, we see that Mercury then is in a great friend sign, right? Because a friend plus a friend makes a great friend. Do you see what I mean? So what that means is, in general, is that Mercury in the 6th house going to work well? The answer is yes. And what does a Mercury in the 6th house working well, what does that mean? This person, he had so much knowledge. I mean, I could sit, he's like, I mean, if any of you know Ernst Wilhelm, he's the same guy. I mean, I hung out with him a couple days ago, and it was like, I arrived, he started talking at me about astrology. I left 48 hours later, and he hadn't stopped talking about astrology. And it was great, because I love that stuff, you know? And it was wonderful, and he was the same way, Richard. But he wasn't like Ernst, where he could just like go and go, because his Mercury is in the 6th house, which are delays and setbacks and obstacles. So he had difficulty with public speaking. He had difficulty sometimes communicating what he meant to say like well. But once he warmed up, once those delays passed, once he kind of like got over that initial like anxiety or whatever it might have been, like there was no stopping him. Right? So when we see planets in 6th, 8th, or 12th, we don't immediately want to jump to the conclusion that it's bad. We want to look at the dignity of the planets. In the same way that when you get planets in the 12th house, like I've got Jupiter and Mercury in the 12th house, which is wonderful for astrology, and they're both in good dignity, which is also good for astrology. And it's also good for expenses and debts. All right? So, but since both of my planets are in good dignity, yes, I have a lot of expenses and debts, but they're all things that I can manage. And so I'm not going into debt because of it. And they're all things that lead to Mercurial and Jupiter things. So they're expenses on astrology. They're expenses on traveling to go to retreats. They're expenses on like 12th house things. So they're expenses, but they're good expenses. Whereas my one of my relatives, who's a doctor, who makes like 4 or 5 times more than I have no idea how much she makes, but she makes a lot of money. And she's got Mars and Saturn in the 12th house. She's always broke. Always broke. And they're in bad dignity. And she's always asking me, what can I do, to help? I'm thinking, you need to work with that Mars and Saturn. She doesn't want to, obviously, because when you have that kind of intensity there, it makes it difficult to see that that's a problem. So that's why when you're looking at planets, you got to look at the dignity. And I'll stop here shortly. I could keep going a little bit, but if you got somewhere to go, don't hesitate to leave if you want. It's not going to be rude to me. I don't care. So if you want to hang around, fine. But when you've got planets in bad dignity, that just shows that there's more likelihood that there's going to be trouble because you don't know how to work the planet. You don't know how to use it. Go ahead.
So when you said she had Mars debilitated in the 6th, right?
No, the 12th. Mars and Saturn in the 12th, yeah.
But even so, like, what would you recommend working with?
What I tell her is I say, quit going to Puerto Rico, every 3 months, and stop sending your children to Germany, all expenses paid, when they've got jobs and they can do it themselves. And that's what I tell her. And she's like, well, I love my kids. I'm like, well, all right, whatever. But again, and that's fine because we all have our karmas, and so it's not. That's the area that's unconscious, right?
So we're trying to bring consciousness to that.
Right, exactly. And you don't want to be judgmental at all because a lot of times what people need, like, I had one woman who contacted me who was having a lot of difficulty with relationships. And it was kind of obvious, like, why she was having difficulty. She was in a Rahu-Venus period Rahu and Venus were in the 8th house of like sexuality and, you know, that sort of thing. Venus was in bad dignity. In the Navamsha, Venus was in the 6th house, and it was also in bad dignity. And she comes to me, and she says, I'm having some relationship problems. You know, what do you think I should do? And she didn't tell me anything. I said, well, are you cheating on your husband? She said, well, how did you know that? I'm thinking, well, Rahu and Venus in the 8th house, and you're in a Rahu-Venus period, and your chart kind of speaks to that in other ways. What's that? You just want to say something?
No.
Yeah, and I just said it, you know, and she's like, oh, wow, and she felt guilty about it. I said, look, everyone in this world does some things that are not, you know, we just need to see, why are you doing that? Do you know what I mean? Let's bring consciousness to this Rahu-Venus thing, and instead of being like, you're doing a bad thing, you're going to hell, or whatever it might be, we need to make you conscious of the fact that with Rahu and Venus together, you probably have some kind of fantasies about like how relationships should be. You have that soulmate mentality, or the fairy tale ending mentality, where you invest all of your things thinking that if you just find that right one, then everything's going to work out for you. That's what Rahu and Venus does in the 8th house, and they explore it through sexuality, and they're usually very sexual people. And so what she needs to do is figure out, she's going to need to find a partner who can fulfill those needs and be very daring and adventurous, sexually speaking, for her. That's why she cheats on her husband, right? So whenever you're working with someone, you're going to see all kinds of people. You're going to see people that do things that you're going to think to yourself, holy crap, I cannot believe this. And one of the things that my wife said, we've been married since I was 16, or not married since I was 16. I met with her when I was 16, and we got married when I was 19 or 20. But she doesn't do the work that I do. She's in public health. And someone asked us one time, I had to chuckle when this happened, someone asked us one time, so, you know, how's your relationship? And she's like, well, you know, we have our ups and downs, you know, and I wasn't expecting that at all. because to me, yes, we do have our ups and downs, and, you know, relationship isn't perfect for anybody. But to me, hearing the stories that I hear from people astrologically about what their relationships are like, I was like, my God, we have like a beautiful relationship. And because that's what I said, she looked at me like, what are you talking about? And so I explained, I said, well, you know, when you work with a lot of people, you start to see human nature. And you start to realize that what you got, even though your chart's not perfect, is really hand over fist, like amazing compared to a lot of individuals. Everyone has difficulty somewhere. So the other beautiful thing about astrology is, number one, it teaches you how to understand consciousness. That's the ultimate. Predictions, forget about that. That's a waste of time. I mean, it's not a waste of time, it's fun. But when I'm talking about the ultimate purpose of astrology, the eye of the Veda is not meant to say, you're going to get a car in 2 years, right? That's not the eye of the Veda. The eye of the Veda is meant to say, this is how consciousness works, and you can understand it, right? All the great sages, Ramana Maharshi, one of my favorites, Yogananda, Yogananda, he did use astrology. That's why he wore bangles. That's why he had like a ruby, it might have been a sapphire too. Like, so it helped him to do his work, but he didn't do it for predictions. Ramana Maharshi would say, well, what's going to happen is going to happen. And that leads you to self-knowledge. And when you study astrology, when you really get into it, when you figure out what the moon means, what Jupiter means, what Mars means, you start to understand what does it mean to be a fully conscious human being. That is the eye of the Veda, right? And then if you want to know if you're going to get a car in 2 years, that's fine. But let's start with this. And also what it does is it gives you insights and compassion for people. Maybe you all are natural at that. I am not. Like I said, I've got Mars, Saturn, Rahu, all on angles, so it's real easy for me to not be compassionate at all. My Atmakaraka is the sun, so I don't really care for comfort. I just want to see we get the job done, right? And what astrology has done for me is that it has made me understand people. And that as an astrologer, our role is to be there for them, to help them understand why they are the way they are, and if possible, give them some insights to help them make their chart more conscious. And that's going to come through understanding the dignities. That's where it starts, by understanding the dignities. All right, so it's like 9:07 or something like that, is that right? So it's 9:07. I think there's another class at 10. Okay. Dennis said I could go over a little bit. So if you need to leave, by all means, take off. Doesn't matter. I understand. But if you have some questions, let's do a little bit of question and answers.
Maybe I missed it. I just want to be clear in the book, as far as positive, negative, you're looking at the final dignity of the ruler?
You're looking at the final dignity. So like if I'm looking at this chart, I would look to see, is it in a great friend sign, great friend sign, great friend sign. So it's the putting together the temporal and putting together the natural friendships. That's what gives you the dignity. That's what you look at.
Because originally, one of the components is in relation to another planet.
That's right.
So, for instance, like if I'm looking at the 10th and the 5th.
10th and the 5th, right.
What do I choose?
Yeah. You choose the 10th Lord. So the Lord of the 10th and the 5th. So like in this chart, if we have, oh yeah. So we've got Mercury ruling the 10th in the 6th. What I'm looking at is Mercury because it's that planet in the house. Okay. Go ahead in the back.
Yeah, I just want to know, suppose there are two planets in Parivartan and both are impacted with me, like suppose Virgo and Pisces exist, and Virgo we have Jupiter with Mars, which is for Virgo ascendant is 8th Lord, so it's very bad.
Yes.
And then in 7th we have Mercury with Uranus. So how to look at it? I mean, is it two negatives with one positive, or
You can look at it that way, but this is what I have seen in experience, because that type of yoga is one that a lot of people kind of latch on to, because they think, well, one's in this sign and one's in that sign, so therefore they should work well. And the way it was taught to me when I learned that was that it's like, I'm in your house, you're in my house, so I'm not going to mess up your house, and you're not going to mess up my house. That's not really true. You know, so if you're both if they're friendly towards each other, then that is true, because you're in your friend's house, your friend is in your house, so you're going to take care of your friend's stuff. But when you get the bad dignity, and if they're enemies, then typically what's going to happen is it'll probably be worse. So it's a more intense, like the part of Vartana Yoga, that shows an intensity of an energy. But whether that's going to be good or bad, it's not all good. It depends on what's the nature of the planets. Like, what are they friends to each other or not? So you look at that. Okay, go ahead.
So, in your chart, I think you had said that Jupiter is friendly to Sun, Moon, Mars, neutral to Saturn, and enemies with Mercury and Venus. And then I think you went on to say that Jupiter has no enemies. Because it's
Jupiter is not enemies to any planet. So like he is not enemy to any planet, but he does have it. Here, I'll just pull it up again. Yeah, there is a difference. So because think about it this way: haven't you ever known anyone that like you really liked, you know, and they didn't like you very much?
No, never. That's never happened.
Yeah, well, I mean that's like. So Jupiter is not an enemy to anybody, but he does have enemies, and believe it or not, his enemies are Mercury and Venus. And that's a whole, like, that's what I mean, you get into mythology and you will understand why that's the case. It really messes things up a little bit. Okay, so any other questions? Go ahead. What's your name?
Michael.
Have we met before? You look really familiar.
I've seen you quite a bit.
Okay, I mean, you look really familiar. So anyway, go ahead, Michael.
How do you incorporate the nodes with the dignities?
Oh, right, this is a very good question. The nodes with the dignities, because there are all these books that say, Rahu's exalted in Taurus, Ketu's exalted in Scorpio, or Rahu's exalted in Virgo, and Ketu's exalted in Pisces. Like, none of the old books agree on that. None of them agree on that. So that's not something that I really put a lot of stock into. But what works really well when you're looking at the nodes, I mean, hands down, this is one of the things that if someone asks me what's an aspect of astrology that you are 95% certain works all the time, it's you look at the dignity of their Lord. Do you know what I mean? So, like for example, here, Rahu is in Leo, which is ruled over by the Sun, and the Sun is in neutral dignity. So Rahu is going to act in a neutral fashion.
Okay.
Whereas Ketu is in Aquarius, and Saturn is in a great friend sign. So his Ketu is going to act more positively, right? And that works. I mean, it's fantastic. And when you see problems with the nodes, usually it's because of the dignity of the node, because the nodes do cause problems, but the nodes are part of our evolution. And those are when people have problems with the nodes, if they don't have help from other planets, and this is something we have to remember is what I'm giving you with the dignity, this is the foundation. It is influenced by friends can help friends. Like there's other aspects to this where you can have a debilitated Mars, and yet it still works well, because maybe that Mars is getting aspected by Sun, Moon, and Jupiter. So that's like, you're kind of like you can't work real hard, you can't take care of yourself, and you can't win your fights, but you got a lot of big friends. So, so that's why we need to remember that there's more to it than what I'm telling you. But this is all I can tell you in an hour and 10 minutes. So with the nodes, when the nodes are in good dignity, the person will have the trouble, but it'll be easier for them to see the problem. Like Rahu in the second house in bad dignity, that's more likely someone becomes an alcoholic or they have addiction problems, but it's in good dignity, so they end up going to AA and they become an advocate for, that. Whereas someone who has Rahu in the second house, and there's other things giving like alcoholism, they become an alcoholic, all their friends leave them, they don't understand why, no one understands them, and like my uncle was that way. He died from alcoholism because of that. He died of alcoholism with like 28 cats. I was like, geez whiz, he loves cats. What's he trying to pacify there? But anyway, so that's when you're looking at the nodes, you look at the dignity from the planet that rules it. Okay, other questions? Go ahead.
Did you see that planets in the 6 brings delays, also in the 8 and the 12?
Say that again.
You say that planets that are in the 6th house bring delays?
Yes.
Also from the 8 and the 12?
Well, the 6th house, when planets are in the 6th house, whatever those planets represent, a person's going to have to pay off some kind of debt before they can get the results of it. That makes you work hard, right? So if someone has planets in the 6th house, maybe health, they'll have to really work hard to get their health strong. There'll be a delay to having good health. If you have planets in the 8th house, those are like sudden breaks and changes. That's like when you're going down the road and all of a sudden your wheel falls off. Like you're not expecting it. It's a drama. It's like, wow, what happened? Versus your engine blows up because you haven't put any oil in it. You know that's coming. That's not an 8th house thing. The 12th house is letting go of things, resolving karmas in the way that you are, like when you're in a relationship with someone, say it's a 12th house relationship. Well, you may lose them to death or something like that, but that's more the 8th. You just one day kind of, if it's good, you realize, we're not really the same people anymore. So it's like you lose it because the karma's over. It's the ending of things naturally. So 6th house are delays. 8th house causes sudden dramatic breaks or changes. It's like your flaw or your weakness you're not aware of. And the 12th house, you're letting go of it. You're being done with it. In the same way that Pisces in the zodiac is the natural ending of things. When you have Pisces, then the person is like resolving a lot of karma within this life. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. And one more and then we need to finish up. Yeah. Go ahead.
Suppose sun or moon, if they're eclipse, the moon with Rahu or Ketu. So they say after 35 the eclipse is gone over. Is it like that, or it is forever it is eclipse? If it is in the natal, it is like that?
It depends. You see that? That's a rule that does work, but again, it goes back to the dignity of it. Because if it's in good dignity, more than likely that will happen. If it's not, that still gives. If they don't work on it, that will be a consistent thing. Which is why astrology, the person needs to become aware and work on something, versus just make that rule. Like that's a good rule to follow.
It's basically telling the karma in this lifetime.
Yeah.
So if it is with moon, means you have to work with relationship with mother
or you have to become emotionally strong.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that we have to conclude. But one thing I want to tell you is I'm going to be here for a few days, and I'm here to teach. So if you want to hang out and talk about stuff, I'm happy to do that. If you find me, but I'm also tired, so I might take a nap. But okay, yeah. So if you find me, you see me around, I'm not doing anything, don't hesitate to approach me and say, hey, let's talk about something. All right. And if I can't talk anymore, I'll tell you. Don't take that personally either. My voice, So anyway, all right. Thank you very much.